Welcome to another edition of Unicorn Chef. I am joined by the illustrious and I dare say heavily awarded Dr. Nina Kollars. I think you might be the first doctor we've had on.
I'm overeducated. It has nothing to do with actual skill or expertise. It's just a lot of extra money, really. That's all it is.
Edition of oh, hold on. I forgot to turn off that. I made that mistake. There we go. Okay, so yes, overeducated, and we're going to see what you can do in the kitchen. First up, of course, is our charity for tonight is the Capital Area Food Bank. For those of you who are in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, please donate. Always let us know what you're donating, and as much as you, of course, want to share, because part of this show, of course, is highlighting and giving back to the community, as well as making the kitchen more accessible. And I promise Nina won't use large words.
I will not use large words. There are no large words.
If you cannot give back to the DMV, there are lots of hungry folks. Certainly, this has been a tough year, and the food banks throughout the country are overwhelmed. If you haven't seen the pictures, there are lines miles long, starting at 5, 6 in the morning for folks to try to get something. Food banks are taxed to the brink. So please donate to your local food bank and try to help a family out. Nina, first question to every unicorn chef is, what are we drinking this evening?
Oh, tonight, this is a great question. So I'll be drinking a number of things through the evening, and it just kind of falls off into just pure tequila over time. But what we're going to start with tonight is just a little bit of Lost Boy cider. So this is a local cidery. I could probably throw rocks at it if I could. And I'm having their sort of raspberry version. It's called Wingman. And they're just a great little company overall. And it's a dry cider, so there's almost no sugar left after they're done, and it's got a nice, adorable pink color. I highly recommend. Their tasting room is open currently, and it's nicely socially distanced. So if you're feeling like you want to get out and stand far away while drinking, I recommend the Lost Boy cider. Cheers.
I am drinking a brilliant fruited double IPA by Treehouse Brew. So, take us away on making tonight's dish, beef bulgogi.
Yeah, so I'm super glad you asked to do this. And when you guys asked for the recipe, it was a bit of a challenge to figure out the recipe, because I just kind of grew up making it. My mother just kind of threw it together. And so whatever is there in the recipe is an approximation. But so, I think as much as possible, what we're going to be making this evening is the marinade, and then I'll show you how to get started. And then what's really cool about this particular recipe is once you make it, you can kind of throw it right into a plastic bag and throw it in the freezer. And then some other day when you're feeling like having Korean food or semi-Korean food, you can pop it right back out. You can thaw it out, throw it right onto the counter, and you're good to go. So, and it thaws really fast because of the salt in there. So if you're following the recipe, I'll try and follow along, but admittedly, I want to talk about a couple things that are unique to Korean cooking, and sort of like how do you get oriented to Korean cooking in particular, because it's not always accessible, right? So you'll only need about 2 or 3 things that are unique purely to Korean foods, and the rest you can get at the regular grocery store. And one of those is a thing called Gochujang, and so I think this is how it's romanized. Gochujang, and you can get it any number of ways. Yep. And so just make sure you have some of this available. You can find it in the Asian aisle in the grocery store, but it's cooler if you go to the Korean grocery store. The other thing that you want to have on hand is a dark roasted pure. Oh, that's an actual gochujang. Thank you very much for that. And then this is a dark sesame oil, and I buy mine obviously in bulk. You don't have to. They come in little tiny bottles, but the dark sesame oil, the roasted sesame oil, yep, is really what gives so much Korean food all of its flavor. And if you have those things at the same time, you're pretty much set, and the rest of it you can kind of make do in the sort of the white people's grocery store. But those two are the harder things, and you can find them on Amazon if you want to. And then the final thing you kind of want to have around, it's not entirely necessary, because if you have the toasted sesame oil, you don't need much more. But if you really like the authenticity, you're going to look for a roasted sesame seed. And the roasted sesame seed is different than the sesame seeds that they sell in the spice aisle, which look like this. You don't want these. You want these roasted ones. And if you can't find them, just DM me or on Twitter, and I will show you how to find them. They're a couple bucks a container, but they really make a difference to me. But ultimately, the flavor really shows up in the sesame oil.
What have you used to substitute for gochujang before?
So I've used a couple things. So gochujang has it's a thick paste. And if you really don't have any access to it, you can use sriracha. Sriracha's hotter and more sour. It's got more vinegar into it, whereas gochujang is just a little bit more sweet. And so you can use it as a substitute. I would massively reduce the amount of sriracha you used, because gochujang just tablespoon per tablespoon is not milder, but it's a winter heat, so it's more the back of the throat than the front of the mouth. So you can use that. The other thing you can use is a thing called Gochugaru, and that's going to be this sort of peppery paste, these flakes here. They use them in making kimchi, and some other time, if we have time, I'll show you guys how to make kimchi. But Gochugaru is a red pepper flake, but not the kind that goes on your pizza. And so you can, if you go to the spice aisle, you'll see what looks like red pepper flake. So if it says like ground red pepper flake, you can kind of get away with it. But in general, I would just hit me up and I'll show you how to get some gochugaru. And increasingly, gochujang. Gochujang is increasingly available, especially at Whole Foods. It's possible. Also, you may see a gray cat walking through now and again. I give up. She has her own mind, and I just kind of push her out of the way. That would be Ripley. Okay. So let's get started. So what you're going to do is just kind of get like one of these little steel bowls. You're going to put all your stuff in there. There's no particular order in which you need to do it. So I'm going to start by grating up my ginger. So I've got some ginger here. I would go with, when you see ginger in the grocery store, you want the smaller ginger. Like there's some that looks like a giant horse's hoof or whatever. That stuff doesn't usually have a lot of flavor in it. So if you can find something smaller where it looks more like thumb-sized ginger, see that they look more like the size of a thumb, these tend to be more flavorful. So you're going to take a chunk of this. I usually just peel it with a peeler or a spoon, right? Get the skin off. And then I go ahead and grate it up. I've got a microplane here, but just whatever it takes to grate it up. You're going to do about 2 tablespoons of that. If you get bored, a smart person has a blender. I broke mine last week, so this is where I'm at.
How did you break your blender?
Huh?
How did you break your blender?
The plastic, the bottom of the thing busted. So anyway, So if you have a blender, you can just toss all this in there, zhuzh it up, and it's over. But we're doing it the hard way today. So you're going to get about 2 tablespoons of this. I'm going to go ahead and put that in your bowl. Do a little bit more. All you're really doing is just getting that ginger broke down really nicely. You can smell the pepper. It's just a wonderful smell. Okay. So once you've got your ginger, I've got about a tablespoon in there. It says I need how many? 2? I usually put about this much. Okay. And so follow your recipe. All right. So once you've got your ginger in, you might want to think about doing your onions. Now, I tried to grate my onion. It'll make you cry a lot. The other thing you can do is just mince it up, right? So take it to, I'll dump that little bit in there. You need about a half an onion. The other way you can do it is just cut it up real fine. Let me get an actual knife for that. All my good knives are in the dishwasher. That's fine. So you're going to cut up your onion nice and small, minced if possible. But just kind of keep it rocking. Really, if you're thinking about Korean food, there's only about 5 or 6 ingredients for which everything gets spicy. So if you have onions, if you have soy sauce, ginger, gochujang or gochugaru, right? And garlic, you're pretty much set for all Korean food. Like it's just the same cast of characters every time you cook. Doesn't matter what you're cooking for Korean food. As long as you got those basic ingredients, you pretty much can cook about everything in Korean food. All right, so I've cut up my onions, I've put them in there. I've got my ginger in there. I'm gonna do a little bit of garlic. For people who like to use the pre-pasted garlic, that's fine, it doesn't matter. If you like a lot of garlic, go for it. If you don't like garlic, don't do it. But in general, Koreans are pretty garlic happy. So I'm gonna go ahead and do about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. smashing methods. You're gonna, again, just like the ginger and the onion, you're gonna want to do it up really fine, just to make sure that it all blends together. Now this marinade, you're gonna go ahead and throw the meat in the marinade for at least 2 hours. So at some level, as long as you're mostly mixed together, the flavors are gonna infuse. And like I said before, I tend to just freeze mine all together and store it in the freezer. So I'm just gonna go ahead and, again, microplane my.
All of you who've been watching this for a long time know that garlic is pretty much in everything, because garlic is the greatest thing that was ever created. But peeling garlic is a pain in the butt. For $15, a garlic press, you never have to peel. You just throw it in there, you squish it through, and brute force, you don't ever have to peel garlic ever again.
I prefer to do the work, but thank you for trying to make that work. There's something, particularly in COVID, when you're locked in your own apartment, where you're like, no, I would rather do this the hard way. Thank you very much. So I've got my garlic in there. All right. And so
listen to the doctor if you want to.
We don't do anything the fast way. Why do we do it that way? I'm going to put my hair up because it's starting to drive me nuts. Knew that was going to happen at some point. In the recipe, I say that you should add about 3 ounces of pineapple juice. It's really any kind of sweet fruit juice or fruit itself. It just depends on what you like. In this case, all I had left over was a can of crushed pineapple. I don't know why I keep aiming wrong. A can of crushed pineapple.
So pineapple juice is going to help tenderize the meat. And the recipe she called for sirloin. Pro tip, you can use cheaper cuts of meat, particularly when you're marinating, because you just let it go longer and it will break down everything.
Exactly right. And so again, as long as you leave that marinade in long enough, a couple tablespoons of brown sugar, as long as you leave that in there long enough, it really doesn't matter. And I think this is one of the reasons I think in our family, Bulgogi happened a lot, because you could buy a whole bunch of meat on bulk. You could store it in the freezer, and you could pay for it. Pay just a few pennies and feed a lot of folk, and that's really how we went about doing it. So I put my brown sugar in there again. I've just got a little bit of a slurry of all these beautiful smelling things together. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of soy sauce, more or less. A lot of people use low salt soy sauce. I think that's for heathens. I just go with the real stuff, and then, just dial back if you don't like it being salty. That's pretty much how it works.
Unless you have a heart condition, get the real thing.
Again, I think in general, I have low blood pressure, so it seems fine. And I'm going to just go ahead and estimate a couple tablespoons of the sesame oil. And that keeps it nice, gets that nice savory flavor in there. Okay. I think we've got it. We got the soy sauce, the brown sugar, the sesame oil, the garlic, the ginger. Gochujang. This fella right here. Just gonna grab a nice healthy tablespoonful, put that in there, and just stir all of this together. And then we're gonna go quickly over to the meat. I wanna show you what I'm working with tonight. Like Bryson said, you can pretty much use any cut. And so I grabbed whatever was on sale. Now this morning I made a batch with an old pot roast, but also on sale was this adorable piece of flank steak. And flank steak is really, really tough if you screw it up. And so it's just sort of a proof.
That's so funny. I also bought the cut of steak that was on sale. I was just like, oh, this is $5.99 a pound. I can cut that part off. Now, I had to carve out a lot more than I normally would with a better cut of meat. But again, you just let it sit and you're going to get a very tasty piece.
The only rule of thumb you want to do with meat in general, right, is this is going to be a pro tip for people who don't spend a lot of time around meat, is you want to cut it perpendicular to the grain. When they say cut it cross grain. And so what does that mean? And so this is actually a piece of the roast from this morning. And what you would do is you would look at the meat itself, and if you just kind of pull on it, you can see there are lines that run this way. That's the grain, right? So if the grain runs like this, you're going to run your knife like this, right? You're going to run it perpendicular to that grain. And this way you're not cutting with the striations of the meat, you're cutting across them, and you're going to make it more tender for the person who's going to chew on it. Flank steaks are really obvious. Like, so if you're looking for where the grain is, you can see the stripes running straight up and down. That's what a flank steak looks like. So you definitely don't want to cut this way. You want to cut against that beautiful grain, because you see those stripes going, you want to cut perpendicular to those stripes, and that's how you make sure that your guest doesn't have to chew forever. Even if you do marinate it, cutting that cross grain is super helpful. So some people, when they want to cut for bulgogi, you want to cut it nice and thin. Some people will throw it in the freezer for a little bit to make that meat a little bit more stiff so that you can cut it up just fine. And that's kind of what I did here. It's not a big deal either way. You're just going to go ahead. And this is really just a matter of what you like, right? If you like to chew on sort of substantial pieces of beef, you can cut a little thicker. But right now I've got the, pretty well thin, maybe deli slice, a thick deli slice. I'm just going to go ahead and work on these for a little bit. And it looks like Bryson's gotten to work cooking up the meat there.
No, I'm actually not cooking up the meat. I always like to add a little. So this is one of the things I like about these kinds of dishes is what you add to dress them up. So of course I'm going to have a rice base. I'm going to top it off with my green onions. I already got a lot of sesame oil, so I don't need to add sesame seeds, but I like a little bit more vegetable with it. So I am steaming green cabbage and carrots.
Oh, beautiful. That's really nice.
I want that to get cooked more, not quite like completely all the way, because then I want to toss it all in at the end.
That ends up and you can do that at any point, right? So my mom likes to marinate slices of onion along with the beef. So in addition to all of the onions you're putting into the ground onion itself, she wants to put another additional, maybe half or whole onion sliced up, thick slices in with the meat, so that when you cook it down, you get even more onions. And it's just really as you would see fit. Okay, the other thing that you should be doing if you're a rice person, and if you have the funds to do so, is invest in a good rice cooker. I have a little 3-cupper. I think all the rage is what's called a Gochugaru rice maker. Really wonderful rice makers, but in all honesty, just get a good rice maker. It doesn't matter if it's a fashion brand or not. Mine is a Sanyo. I'll show it to you in a second. I've had it for 15 years now, so it won't break. So I can't get a fancy one until it breaks. So that's where we're at.
I can't even get the rice cooker. I go with just a pot, right level of temperature and timing, and
so that's where I'm not willing to do that kind of work. That's too much work. No, I leave my rice to my little smart machine. That's all I need. All right, so I'm finishing up cutting up the beef here. I'm gonna kind of swim around in there. And I would go with the proportions that are on the recipe for weight, just because this marinade doesn't get taken out. It sits right in it, and you're gonna cook everything all together. And so you kind of wanna make sure that you keep that balance. So when it says 1.5 pounds of steak or meat, just kind of stick with that ratio. Otherwise you'll end up with like something either too salty. When in doubt and you think you have too much marinade, try and drain some of it off before you cook. But in general, it just becomes its own beautiful little stewing in its juices dish. There are some folks who will just make these beautiful slabs of meat and cook it like they were doing maybe like a Japanese bar service, little chunks of meat. It's not my jam. I like to just kind of soup it up and put it all over rice. You can do something more delicate, but this is really a home dish for me. This is really just kind of something you sit down and eat with a big old spoon. So,
right out of the pot.
Huh? Yeah. I mean, just straight out of it, right? Like, and you'll see me try. Okay. Before I shift to the cooking phase, I want to talk to you a little bit about rice. I'm not a rice shamer. I don't care. But if you're going to try and do it Korean style, you really do need a nice sushi style of rice that's short grain. In this case, I've got nishiki. You can get kokuho rose or whatever, but you're going to get a sushi style rice. And I don't care what people say about it's pre-washed and you don't have to wash it. You always have to wash the rice. As a good Korean, I'm required to say so. You have to always wash the rice, even when it says rinse free. Just wash it a couple times because you're taking the starch off the outside of the rice. And by doing so, that rice becomes these adorable little independent pieces of rice, and they come up really beautiful.
As opposed to when you get the clumpy, sticky stuff.
It's fantastic. Okay, so I ran some through my rice cooker. I'm going to move this stuff over and just show you a little bit of the rice. When your rice is done being cooked, the other rule in general in life is you have to do what's called fluffing the rice. It's not my language. I didn't start it. So when the rice cooker first shuts off, you're going to get your little rice paddle, which is usually a piece of bamboo like this, or a spoon if you got one. You're going to open up that rice cooker, and that surface is going to be good and flat. And you're going to want to take it and you just want to lift and put a little bit of air between all of those beautiful grains of rice. You're going to try and break them up a little bit. You don't have to use it right away, but when it's done cooking, you want to do this before it has a chance to pack itself down and then just sort of make it really uncomfortable to work with, get clumpy and hard. So you want to fluff the rice. Once you fluffed it, you can leave it alone, put it back in the rice cooker, it doesn't matter. So that's what I'm going to do here. Just going to fluff the rice a little bit. So it comes up a little higher. All set. Okay. You fluffed your rice.
So in a rice cooker, it's just rice and water, or do you also have to add some kind of fat or oil?
Nope, just rice and water. Yep. I mean, if you want to, I think some people add salt to it, but in general, the way I grew up was just rice and water, throw it in there, make it happen. And those smart rice cookers will do brown rice, mixed rices, or whatever. I just use white rice, but you know.
So for those of you who are doing my method without the fancy rice cooker that sings to you when it's done,
it does sing.
Butter is the best fat or oil to add to it for a really fluffy rice when you're cooking on the stove. I've worked with many fats. I've tried all of them. Butter is the best.
It must impart just amazing flavor, I would imagine. Butter and sesame oil go together quite well.
When I see you in a few weeks, I am going to prove. You bring your rice cooker rice.
We will have
some stove rice, and we'll compare. Plus, I don't have fancy Asian rice. I have, the large bag, 25-pound bag of
like a nickel
rice.
Grocery store. Let's start cooking real quick. So I put this first batch aside. It's going to sit aside because it needs to marinate, so that one's fine. But I've prepped another one. What I've got for you is just a nice cast iron fry pan. This was sent to me over the internet by a very wonderful hacker person who saw me asking questions about cast iron fry pans, and he said he had an orphaned one and would send it to me. And so this is what this one, I've been working with this one for a while now. It's fantastic. But in reality, you can use pretty much anything to cook with. You don't have to get fancy, but in this case, it holds heat nicely and it really cooks well. So that's what I'm going to rock out today.
And cast irons, for those of you who watched the show before, are not expensive, and they show up a lot in these recipes over and over again.
Oh, really?
To tell you something. Yes. The only problem with a cast iron is you can't wash it in a dishwasher, and you can't wash it with soap. So it takes a little bit of extra effort to maintain it. But
That's
it is
right.
worth it.
And it will, if you throw it in the dishwasher, it'll rust really fast, and then you'll have to do some curing, and it sucks. So don't do it. Treat it nicely. It'll be your best friend. But it's a great cooking vessel, and it's my new favorite thing for baking as well. Heating up the pan. Oh, yeah. I'm heating up the pan. Drop some oil in there just to keep things from getting too burny, sizzly. That's a technical term. I got a PhD for that. But, olive oil, anything that doesn't have you don't need to worry about smoke point. It's going to cook pretty fast, but, just something you normally, vegetable oil, if that's your jam. I've got some of this, whatever this is here. Just put a little bit of oil on the bottom. This is a bit much, seems fine. Okay, like I said before, some people will take it piece by piece and cook it one by one, each piece of meat. I don't have that kind of patience. And plus, when you throw it all into one lump sum, you get this beautiful sauce at the bottom, which is like every reason to have the rice and the vegetables. So let's go ahead and rock it out. I wonder if I can find where I put mine. Aha! thawed it in the fridge. So you can see it's everything I just put together here, all the marinade. It's just been sitting around, throw it right in the pan.
So the reason people will do like one at a time or like space things out is that the temperature of the pan actually will drop as you add things. So when you're trying to get a sear, you really have to pay attention to the temperature of what you're cooking with, which is one of the reasons that skillets are great, because you're able to hold a higher temperature to be able to chuck everything into, just like we did in the olden days, and not worry about this stuff.
You can see it's buzzing away back there. Stir it up now and again. If you're not a person who stirs everything on the icy rice, and it's not, I cook 99% of my stuff with a set of metal chopsticks.
I threw onions in, so I'm going to do a base with caramelized onions, because the meat, since I cut my meat really small, is not going to take a long time to cook. So I want to get my onions to a translucent. Then I'm going to throw in that, because I really love onions and garlic and everything. So I have like double onions, because I have onions marinating in my beef. And we're going to have fresh caramelized onions as a part of my dish on top of the green onions, which I have, an entire, small country's production worth ready for it.
So on those green onions, while this is cooking behind me, this is how not of a worry it is. Just let it happen. If you don't clean green onions a lot, the best way to do it is to find the sort of the last man standing. That's this fella right here, and just pull him right off. And then you can pinch the top off, and you're mostly clean. Take 2, 3, clean, rinse it off, and you're ready to rock. Don't do anything more than that, and that's a clean green onion. And often you'll just do that, whatever you've got. Pinch the bottoms off, and that one's clean too. Just take the last man standing, the one that's furthest out, rip it clean, take the top off, rinse, and you're ready to rock. So I'm going to go ahead and mince these up while that's cooking. I do further pulverize the roasted sesame seeds. I've got a basic coffee bean, $8 cups, and I go ahead and I whip them up in here. You'll watch me do that in a second. What are you doing, Bryson?
I just added my beef in. I got my onion to a translucent state, and we're ready to go. So this is my part of the show where I love to insult my guests. So the first question is, you have always been a really cool person. Why did you become a PhD? Why didn't you, try to roll those dice?
You seemed like a nice person until you got a PhD.
You had so much going for you, and then you just started to throw it away.
So close to being a good person. No, I got a PhD because I was doing research for the Library of Congress. So really cool job. I would go into the stacks, read books and stuff, and then write stuff. And this occurred to me one day that I didn't want a method or an approach or a process. And someone told me that's what happens in grad school when you get a PhD, is they teach you how to set up a research agenda. And so I figured I did. So I got a PhD, and I guess the rest is, it's my downfall. It's my fault. Hold on a second.
So how did you get from the Library of Congress to the Naval War College?
Who even knows? This is one of these questions where it's not clear. A series of really big accidents. So where did I put my cutting board? I'll grab another one. The cutting board has meat on it. Give me a second. Aha! Okay, so I'm working at the Library of Congress. I decided I need a PhD. My mentor says, don't ever get a PhD that you have to pay for. Make sure that somebody else pays for it, which really just means you teach classes. Okay, so you still work.
Indentured servitude.
Say yes. This is how grad schools make money. So I do that. And while I do that, I decide I really love teaching. So I decide, forget going back to DC. I'm going to teach for the rest of my life. And I really, for about 8 years I guess it's going to be about 10 years altogether, during the PhD and then after, I taught undergrad. Best job in the world. Most amazing job in the world. Helping people figure out whether they should be in college, one, whether it matters, two, and what's their calling. Like, it was just amazing. But I had to write a dissertation, and the dissertation was about how Army enlisted and junior officers adapt on the battlefield. And so I wrote some pieces about how military people adapt. You know, they take the stuff that's in front of them and the problems they have, and they solve it right there because nobody else will. So it's like an adaptive theory of innovation.
Or they start cooking shows. It goes either way.
It could go either way. Yes, that's right. But this is also part of my love for the hacking community, right? Which is they see a problem in front of them. They enjoy the process of problem solving, and they just do it. They're not going to wait for someone else to solve it for them. So anyway, I do that work, and I'm working at Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania, loving life, teaching undergrads, and I get a phone call from the Naval War College, and they said, "We know you like teaching, but it doesn't seem like your work fits in. Maybe you want to come and spend time with us." And I said, okay. So that's how I ended up there, a professor at the Naval War College. I think they made a mistake hiring me, but they don't seem to think so. And so that makes me happy, but definitely weirder than most people there. Although most of them are pretty weird. Okay. I'm out of clean knives. Oh, I got a little sentoku here. It's a trashy little sentoku, but it works. Don't let anyone shame you with knives. Just whatever works, as long as you don't cut your fingers off, it gets the job done. Right now, I'm just cutting up my green onions. I like to put them in fresh. My mom likes to cook them a little bit. Doesn't really matter. Oh, did you get some on the stove already?
I think I got them. So
okay.
I'm checking my flavor. But yeah, no, green onions, just like cilantro, you never want to cook them for that long anyway, because it kind of, the flavor just disappears.
That's right.
So either fresh or like very like blanched with it. That anything more than that, you kind of lose it.
I promised I would show off what it is to pulverize these puppies, so I'll do that real quick, and then I'm going to plate up. So I've got just regular toasted sesame seeds. Put about a tablespoon into that coffee bean grinder. This is specific. I don't use coffee beans in here, but it doesn't matter. Wander over to the outlet. That's all you need to do. And it turns into this very beautiful, powdery, flavorful, it smells so good. Freshly ground sesame seeds smell amazing. All right, let me plate up. I'm gonna go back to my rice. Oh yeah.
So I threw my rice in to soak up those extra juices, and then I'm going to add the vegetables that I've been blanching.
Oh, the cat is on the counter. Hold on a second. Well, everybody meet Miss Ripley. So she's sitting in a spot where she knows that if she sits there long enough, I'll give her a treat. So I'm just going to see to that while Bryson's plating up food.
Sounds like your owner has you trained.
She does. Ready? Yeah, you want one? Okay. Just one here. All right, ready? Let's go. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So she sits right there when she wants a treat, so which happens a lot. But anyway, and my second cheese. I mean, this is about as close as it gets to just a beautiful standard Korean meal, and serve it to your friends. There's no reason to make it fancy. There's no reason to try and pretend it's anything other than just really good comfort food. And maybe it comes with a fancy Korean word attached to it, but I could eat this about 3 times a week. Oh, where are you? You doing your vegetables now, Bryson?
Yep, just threw them all in.
I'm just going to start eating.
I've got my rice in there. That soaked up the juice. Now I'm adding the vegetables. Just start melding all the flavor together. One trick, if you're lazy with carrots, you don't have to really cut your carrots, which is a little harder when they're fresh. Once they get steamed, it works really well to just chop them with a bamboo spoon right in the dish. This is something to do too if you're not like doing a cooking show. Are you already plated and we're going?
What?
You are literally, all right, this is why you're a PhD. You're the first guest chef, the unicorn chef, to get ahead of me on like the whole thing. All right.
Well, you added extra layers of difficulty. It occurred to me to make a Korean spinach as well, which it's going to shock everybody in the audience, but it needs sesame seeds, garlic, soy sauce. Like I said, you have this basic handful of ingredients for Korean food. And once you have those items on hand, which is why most Koreans have like 6 bunches of green onions, 3 or 4 yellow onions in the refrigerator at all times, because it's the basis for how you make most Korean food. If you've got it on hand, you're set to rock. So yours is like the fancy version.
You watched everything I just did. I don't know that I would call it fancy. Right, well, before we do our final sign off with the picture of the evening, anything you'd like to share with everybody?
I don't know. I guess mostly I just want everybody to know to like it's tough right now for everybody, and I think if it was last month was mental health month, and I just want to remind everybody that it's okay not to be okay. And I've been a little depressed for a little bit, and this has been just making sure you get out there and keep active and try and keep engaging no matter how tough it feels. Like that's really important. And so stuff like this is just super helpful. And so I want to say thanks for keeping me to the thing, because I desperately wanted to cancel just because it's hard, but I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be making food. So thanks.
Yeah, I think I would summarize 2020, and we took 18 years back and start over. Is one, be kind to yourself. This is not hard for you. This is hard for everyone. So don't take all that responsibility on you. And two, just show up, and you'd be surprised how often things just take over once you do. So here is our.
Oh, wow. They're both gorgeous. I love them both.
So remember, if you're on the DMV, please donate to the Capital Area Food Bank. And if you're not, please donate to your local food bank and help all of the hungry families and a lot of folks that are really struggling this year. Please do.
Also, for folks, I forgot to say this, for folks who aren't beef eaters or even meat eaters, that same marinade, just take some nice extra firm tofu, marinate it for just a little bit, doesn't need overnight, fry it up the same way, and it's just as good. Fantastic. All right.
Nina, so great to see you again. I mean, sorry, Dr. Kollars. So great to see you
don't even. Oh, the cat's back. I'll just kind of cover her up. There we go.
Everybody at home, thank you for joining us, and stay safe.
Bye, everybody.